Good morning. I'm Bonnie Gardner. I'm co-chair of the Public Affairs Forum of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Austin, 4700 Grover Avenue. Welcome to our Public Affairs Forum. It's free and open to the public. You can find out more about our forums at www.austinuu.org. And today we are going to have a talk by Dick Peterson on rainwater harvesting, and Dale Beulah will be introducing Dick Peterson. Dale?
Thank you, Bonnie. Good morning, everybody. In case you haven't noticed, we are low on rainfall in Central Texas. Before I introduce Dick, I will remind you that we have a few items to give away at the back table after the presentation. We have low-flow aerators for your faucet to save water. We have some low-flow shower heads if they're not quite all gone. Moisture meters. All these items are free from the city of Austin. All you have to do is go down to the water department and pick up yours. You can even get gators for your tree so you can let your tree be watered slowly during this hot, dry, upcoming summer. Climate change is transforming the way we look at water, its use, and its conservation. Rainwater harvesting is easy, popular, and this presentation will talk about cisterns, barrels, potable water systems, and rain gardens, because Dick Peterson is an expert in all those areas. He served the city of Austin for about 14 years, first as coordinator of Xeriscape, irrigation and rainwater programs with the water utility. And most recently, he was the environmental program coordinator and of the renowned Austin Green building program. His specialty is water conservation, so think of good questions. We happen to have some rebate applications in the back. As you know, the city provides rebates for these kinds of programs, so if you would like to take advantage of Dick's presentation. But let's not talk any more about that. Let him explain it to you. Dick Peterson, welcome.
Thanks. Thank you for inviting me. I'm almost back home. My family farm was the south half of Rosedale, and I grew up there, went to Rosedale Elementary School, went under the fence to Beck's Rosedale Drug, which is now the little subdivision of businesses over here right around the corner. I have connections to the log house that's just down the street on 49th and Sinclair. We will see some rainwater harvesting going on, but if you want to watch rainwater harvesting installations going on, they are updating all of their gutters to collect more rainwater, and we'll be replacing the 3 metal cisterns, of which one of them you can see from 49th Street. They're going to be adding an additional metal cistern. All of those are on order. It takes about 6 months to get those in. From the Sinclair site, you'll be able to see 2 200-gallon tanks going up by the rose bushes in front of the main structure. And right by their driveway will be 3 200-gallon round harvesting tanks. You won't be able to see the 2 oblong tanks that will be going in right next to their front porch. So they're really adding a lot of rainwater harvesting there. They're also connected to the Galt excavation out by Florence. Mr. Collins is an archaeologist, and that long-time dig for our history has been going deeper and deeper in discovering how far back we actually go. At his ranch nearby, they also have a log house there. Since the 60s, they bought that house, and they're going to be adding 2 50,000-gallon ferrous cement tanks out there. So I'll be updating my presentation as these things go along. But today we're going to just start with the basics and learn just a little bit about rainwater harvesting. Water is our most precious resource. They say that the wars that we now are involved in over oil, our grandchildren will be fighting the same wars, but over water. And supply and demand is the problem that we are facing. It's a historic situation. And as the demand increases, we're looking for different areas where we might be able to conserve water. And just to give you an idea, an inch of rain on an acre can generate 27,000 gallons of water. A 1-inch rain on a 20 by 50 mile heavily urbanized city will generate 17.4 billion gallons of water. But as the slide in the middle shows, 99% of that is impermeable, meaning it will not soak in. Therefore, the slide on your right, on your left, shows the debris stopping up in creeks. Well, if we can stop this action or slow it down by harvesting rainwater, and we'll even discuss a little bit about rain gardens, which is kind of like a miniaturization of the city's stormwater detention ponds. We'll get into that a little bit today, too. The perfect marriage of rainwater harvesting, rain barrels, cisterns, is the rain garden idea. And this is looking for your landscape depressions where water naturally flows and stays. If you don't have that, you can actually excavate that area and fill it with a prescriptive mix of soils, and then when the rains come, it soaks in, it infiltrates. And the plants that we put in there are the plants that have been growing naturally by the old cemeteries. They escape the cemetery plots and they go out to what we call the bar ditches, and when it rains, they pop up. You go out to Schulenburg or Taylor and look around those areas and see what they historically planted to honor their loved ones when they passed away. Those have escaped, and they're in the bar ditches. When I was in the Texas Rose Rustlers, we rustled roses. We did it by permission by the time I was joining it. Historically, they didn't have permission, but we would also pick up the bulbs that are in the bar ditches. And these are the types of things that we want to put in the rain gardens. The City of Austin not only has a nice booklet of water conserving plants that y'all have outside you can pick up, but they have a rain garden site too that has the prescriptive plants for a rain garden. Another effective marriage is rain barrels and ponds. This little pond in my backyard has been on the Austin Pond Tour a couple of times, and I make sure when those people come to see the pond that they go around the corner to see my big rainwater harvesting tanks that you're going to see shortly, that I use to fill the pond, because a pond can waste a lot of water in the heat of the day. Rainwater harvesting through the ages, this is not something new. It's been practiced for over 4,000 years in the deserts of southern Israel. The combination of rainwater harvesting and then later drip irrigation is what made the deserts bloom. Most of the innovation done with drip irrigation is done by an Israeli company at their kibbutzes, where they actually do the research and make developments come along in drip irrigation. Many of the new developments that you see with the big name companies are kind of the passé new developments from Netafim, the Israeli company that has expired their patents, and so that becomes a new thing for the other people to develop. But they are the innovators. Ancient Romans had cisterns and aqueducts. Our farms and ranches had cisterns for both rainwater and well water. This is now again coming full circle. Many of the projects that I get involved with in the rural areas are combining their well water with their rainwater, because the wells are becoming less dependable. It takes them longer times to pump, so they can pump the water to fill up their cisterns to the amount that they absolutely need to live on, and then leave the extra space available for addition of rainwater. City folks are doing a similar type thing where they hook up a fill that automatically fills a cistern to a level that allow them to use it in their gardens, but leave the remainder available for the rainwater harvesting. Now, what's happening with the mention of global warming is We are in the beginnings of different weather patterns. You can go to many websites, including the American Rainwater Catchment Systems Association, and they have calculations for how big a cistern needs to be. University of Texas has done some recent research, and their tentative conclusion is that we're going to be in an extended period of drought, interrupted by hurricane-induced rains, something like what happened in the Northeast recently, of as much as 15 inches in 24 hours on a somewhat regular basis. So the old calculations for how much rainwater do we need are kind of going out the window. They're using those calculations and then doubling the size of the cisterns so they can go between these periods of drought interrupted by these excessive rains that we are going to be expecting. And this has to do with the warming of the oceans and where the hurricanes are going to go and how often they're going to come and how intense they're going to be. So don't buy any coastal property right now. It's probably going down in price. The Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center at one time had the largest rainwater system at 72,000 gallons in the United States. Advanced Micro Devices, when they put their system in several years ago, had 1.5 million gallons of water, 1 million gallons in one cistern that's under a parking lot. Many Caribbean nations and some European nations are requiring rainwater harvesting. The state of Texas requires it on public buildings now. It's an ancient concept. Many times they did underground cisterns and storage. We are seeing that in the areas where we can dig. I'll show you a little bit of an example of that. Well, why do people harvest rainwater? It's almost neutral, the pH of it. So it's slightly acidic when it falls in this area, but that acid kind of goes away as it sits in a tank. It's good for plants, ponds, and fish. It doesn't have the dissolved minerals from the soil that we get from Lake Travis when we pump our city water out. It doesn't have the chemicals that the city puts in them to make it safe for us to drink. It may reduce erosion, and it possibly reduces your water bill, especially since the city of Austin has a rebate now for up to $5,000 for 50% of the cost of a rainwater cistern installed in the city of Austin. So people are lining up to get that money while it's there at the rate of 50 cents a gallon for a non-pressurized system and $1 a gallon for a pressurized system. If you're out buying parts for a rainwater harvesting system in Texas, these sales tax exemption is applied, and you may have to print out a form. It's available from the state of Texas. I think I have a link on my website too, but you print that out and take it to the big box stores, and then you have to go to the special services desk and explain to them that, yes, you are claiming an exemption for sales tax. Save, 8.25%, something like that. It adds up, especially if you're doing a big system. Now, if you're buying something from a rainwater harvesting company or you're having a contractor do it, they all know all. So it's just if you're doing it on your own. The cisterns or tanks come in various different configurations, tall and skinny, squat and flat. These are the ones that are above ground. They're relatively easy to find now. You can develop a simple system on your own. I have a printout of this on my website, or you can request a PDF. The PDF actually will print out 11 by 17 and has a lot of text on it explaining every little joint and movement of the water and how you might use the water in your landscape. But the systems are relatively simple. It's just replacing your downspouts from your gutter with PVC piping. And the size of the tank is whatever you can afford and the location that you have. It is no longer in Texas a problem with homeowners associations. To a general point, the state legislature said you cannot restrict someone from harvesting rainwater or putting in solar panels. But they do leave it up to the homeowners associations to write the rules as to how you might do it. So yes, you may do it. You may have to restrict it to the height of the fence, or you may have to put it in the backyard. They can still do that. the problem is the legislature gave TCEQ the job of writing the rules as to how this works, and those rules are kind of shelved right now. They're waiting for the legislature to come back and clarify a lot of things before they really write the rules. But, yeah, you can do it. And even if you want to put a solar panel on the front of your house and your homeowners association say you can't put a solar panel because it's on the front of your house, yes, you can if that's the south side and the only side that you can get the solar rays. So we're working on it, folks. How about a fish pond tank? This shows a little simple system, and the horizontal pipe is actually what's going to take the water into the imaginary 500-gallon fiberglass stock tank that is in front of there. You can see the pipes barely the same color. They're painted the same color as the walls, but you can see the pipes kind of at the same height where I drew them in the picture. And, of course, then out of the bottom of that comes fish, poop, fertilized rainwater. The tomatoes, the grapes, any of your vegetables you might be growing will love what's coming out of the bottom of that tank. And the grandkids love to feed the fish until they feed too much and kill the fish. But another story. The feed and ranch supply houses around the rural areas used to be where we got the rainwater harvesting tanks. Originally, they were that white plastic that had to be painted because we were trying to keep the algae down from the inside of it. So the manufacturers began bringing them in black and green, and now there's a bunch of different colors that you can get them in. But you see the different configurations based on the height of the gentleman that's standing there. And you can fit a tank in just about anywhere you want to. I said you needed to paint them. I didn't see how you needed to paint them. But you can decorate these however you would like. You can cover them with wood to make them look like an old wooden tank. You can hide them in a shed if you need to do that. Recycled drums come in all different various shapes and sizes. These are called IBC totes. You sometimes see them on the side of the road for sale. The gentleman selling them off the back of his truck has triple washed them for you to make them clean and washed off the skull and crossbones that was on the label. So the ones you'll see shortly from me had Hawaiian punch in them, and the fish got a little bit happy the first time they got filled. But I want to know what was in a recycled tank before I purchase it and use it for rainwater. This gentleman said these fell off the back of a computer industry in Austin off the loading dock. Wouldn't tell me where they came from, but they had isopropyl alcohol in them, so it was some sort of thing that they used to clean computer components, I guess. These are recycled 55-gallon drums nested together. This was not one that was for the city's rebate. We'll visit here in a minute with the fellow's innovative pump system. But Larry Gillig used these recycled drums, and if you were wanting to get a rebate from the city, those would have to be sheltered with shade cloth to keep the algae down or painted. These are the ones I mentioned on one side of my house, the IBC totes. The picture on the left shows they've been covered with black landscape fabric to deter the algae. And then my wife wanted nice little plastic. Well, she wanted lattice. I wanted plastic because I only have 5 feet between my house and the property line. And I didn't want to catch my shirt when I was walking by, so that's that smooth plastic to cover them. The ones toward the back you see are a little higher than the ones in the front, so I actually have 2 different heights of these tanks there. Other containers at my house, you'll notice the City of Austin type containers in the center that they used to distribute. City of Pflugerville and City of Cedar Park recently delivered to their constituents some rainwater tanks from the same company that the one on the left is. So they call theirs the Ivy. The one on the right has plants growing in a little reservoir area on the top of it. Kind of nice. That's in my backyard, too. Zilker Botanical Garden, Master Gardener Greenhouse. If you go to the Zilker Garden Festival, April 6th and 7th this year, I don't know whether I'm speaking on Saturday or Sunday, but whatever day I'm speaking on, after I get through speaking, I can take you to the Master Gardener Greenhouse area. They actually have 4 tanks out there in this location now. They have several tanks at different locations around Zilker, and they are using this water judiciously, especially on azaleas that don't like alkaline water, so they're using the rainwater. To give you an idea of just how much you can harvest, a 10 by 10 garden shed, which you might have in your backyard, will give you 60 gallons of water in just a 1-inch rain. And how many times do we get 3 inches in our rain gauge overnight? And if the forecasts come true, we're going to be getting more and more of that overnight too. Underground systems I mentioned. This is just one type. This uses cages. The City of Austin barrels, when I was at City of Austin and we took the lowest bid to distribute rain barrels, we shipped air from Canada to Austin because they were not able to have the top taken off of them. You couldn't nest them like Dixie cups, but they were the low bid. So you always try to think of embodied energy when you're trying to buy something. Well, these particular tanks come shipped on a pallet. They're flat. The center part of that is like milk crates, but it's assembled on job site. And what you have here is basically a pond, a fish pond. The company that distributes this particular brand actually distributes fish pond liners, and they've just picked up this product also from Australia, which Australia does many of the innovations in rainwater harvesting. This shows this being installed at Ewing and Irrigation in Cedar Park. But as you see, it's got a plastic type liner. It's like roofing material that we use for the liner of a hole, and then you assemble these cages and put the cages in there. You bring the plastic back over the top, the liner back over the top of the tanks, and provide ways for water to get in and out. And then you cover it with rocks, and you can use a disappearing fountain, a waterfall. You can cover it with grass and put it in your front yard, and nobody will even know it's there. And so the one on the left is the disappearing waterfall at the Ewing site in Cedar Park. But you can make little decorative fountains and the disappearing fountains that you may have seen. And if you're using all rainwater, you can operate these even in times of city restrictions. But don't let there be any chlorine in there when they test it, because that'll show that you're using city water and not following the regulations. Different design options. This was the second rainwater tank installed at the Miller redevelopment, our former airport. And that's a metal tank. That's like just exactly like the tanks that will be going in at the Collins on 49th and Sinclair. This is what's considered a dry connection, meaning that after the rain is over with, that pipe is dry. So it's an easy way to connect a rainwater tank, but if you have a lot of kids with access, that's a great place to hoist each other up on or hide our chin on. So I would think that's an attractive nuisance if you have a lot of kids around. So we use a wet system a lot of times to get the water in the tank. In the City of Austin, we are part of the 2009 plumbing code. Any city that adopts that, rainwater is considered high hazard. So if you use a pressurized system, you have to have this device here, which is called an RPZ, to protect the city's water from your rainwater. And that RPZ has to be mounted out of the ground. You see how high it is there. That's where the pump is also going to be, on that little pad. But many of the systems that I'm doing in the City of Austin we're doing non-pressurized. So we just take the 50 cents a gallon rebate rather than going for the $1 a gallon rebate, which brings in the RPZ at about $500 that you don't get the rebate for. So you have to kind of balance that out. Companies are celebrating their rainwater harvesting systems. They're putting them out front. They're making them into signage. These particular ones are from companies that for 100 years have been making silos up in the plains. And these silos are converted with liners on the inside of them to be rainwater harvesting systems. This is one that we had at Zilker, and then we moved it to the Austin Nature Center. You might recognize the building in the back there. Great place to go see animals with your kids and big dinosaur bones and things like that. But it comes apart, so we could disassemble it and reassemble it. They even use the same base. It's just stabilized granite sand and timber materials for their base. And they put a device on the inside of it that's kind of a jack. And in this particular case, and in many of the tanks in similar size, they'll build the roof first, jack it up, put a circle of the metal around it, and then jack it up higher and put another circle of the metal so they can just keep jacking it up. You do have to leave a space there for the guy inside to get out. So that's what that opening is. He would not like it. The pump systems, you may have seen well pumps that have a big blue, usually tank sitting next to them. This is to keep your pumps from operating continuously, so it'll turn off and on. It's a bladder in there. Well, the newer pumps that we're using for rainwater harvesting, most of the time they're not even using those. This is a jet pump, and it has that bladder inside it. So it's doing the same thing in that little silver area. And then we're using quick connects, the materials there where you can connect it up to your rainwater system, so that in freezing weather, you can take the pump part out and put it in the house in the wintertime when you're not using it. I said, here's Larry. I asked the question of the fellow that I gave the last presentation to, is this eligible for a pressurized system rebate? David is with the city of Austin. And he couldn't quite answer that. But David Gillig is operating his bicycle. He says, my cistern, my plan is to mount a 55-gallon barrel around 10 feet off the ground and pedal it full every other day or so. I'm pretty sure I can pump it that high at better than 2 gallons per minute. Then I have a drip irrigation system to allow it to seep out on the garden. I hooked up a water pump to a bicycle trainer and use it to pump my water out of my rainwater catchment system. It takes about 30 minutes to empty a City of Austin rain barrel at a fairly leisurely pace. So innovation in rainwater harvesting, we like to celebrate. And there are those quick connects that we allow us to take these pumps apart, take them apart in the wintertime. If you're going to have a drinking water system, also the legislature decided that even though you're on a centralized water system, you may now make your own water. For a while, you could not do that. If you were on municipal type water, you could not make drinking water. You may now do that. Not necessarily easily, but you are allowed to do it. And you will filter that rainwater and you will put it through UV light to kill the bacteria. You become your own water purveyor, so it's important for you to make sure you're keeping those filters clean. This is one type of a filter system that is now being used. It's called a vortex filter. These were first coming out of Germany, and they spin the debris and let it go to the they lose a little bit of the water by spinning it and putting the debris down into the sewer. But it is a way to do a first flush filter system on a system. This is even one that's underground, so it's using a vortex to spin the water. The vortex is created by the pressure of the water. Your tank does have to be below this area, so you have to be higher up where the vortex is to fill a tank lower than that. So you might dig a big hole and put in a concrete tank. These are vaults. They're something like septic tanks. Same companies that make septic tanks are putting these in. These are some plastic ones. They can go under gravel, kind of disappear, so you never even see them. This is big tank above ground. This is Joe Wheeler, who is importing those vortex filters, and he sent me the pictures of the vortex filters so that we could use them today. Design options, you'll notice that there is a plastic tank to the right, but a tank can also be placed inside a rock disguise. So you can hide these however you want to and make them go away. People ask me, how do we keep the mosquitoes out? Bacillus thuringiensis israeliensis, BT. You use it on vegetables. It kills larvae. One of these little tablets is a large lifesaver, and it will cover 100 square feet of water for 30 days with BT, unless it rains. So I take these and break them up. You can get this in liquid, you can get it in powder, but I like the tablets because I can break them up. Then I can put about a thumbnail-sized piece in every rain barrel. So I'm not using the whole one. After a rain, I'll put another thumbnail-sized piece in every rain barrel. I also can take the pieces and toss them up on the roof, and they roll down into the gutters, and it inoculates the gutters because they're always got a little bit of water in there and dew. That's where the mosquitoes are laying their eggs. The eggs will go through your screen filters and get in your tanks anyway. So I'm inoculating by throwing it up onto the roof. Now, my neighbors think I'm crazy going around, I'm picking spiders out of the air or something, I don't know. But it does work. And when it rains, it then goes into our rainwater tanks. And that's the basic idea of doing rainwater harvesting. It gets you started, and we've left time for us to have plenty of question and answer.
Raise your hands high so we can see you. Okay. Any questions over here before I come over in that direction? All right.
Do not let that fellow named Richard ask a question.
Hi, I'm Russell Eskew. Do you allow for swimming in these cisterns?
Do you allow for swimming in these cisterns?
Yeah.
Well, I used to swim in my granddaddy's cistern. I don't know if he allowed me or not. I also fell into his cesspool one time, and that's a different story. It's a natural process. I probably would not do it. There are natural swimming pools that are being made now. I wouldn't do it if you're going to use it for drinking water. But I recently went to a laboratory presentation in Bastrop where LCRA presented their findings on rainwater tests. And they suggest that you test your rainwater on a regular basis because E. coli has been found in water. Whatever lands on the roof can land in your rainwater. So you always want children to be careful around rainwater. You want to watch that, even in a fish pond, the pond to mouth tendency, you want to avoid that. So have your rainwater tested, occasionally. And after that study, I actually started putting a quarter cup of bleach in my approximately 500-gallon tanks once a month. I didn't have them tested. I just said, I'll inoculate them with a little bit of bleach anyway. And that's just to be safe.
We have a question here from Richard Halpin.
I said he couldn't ask a question. Richard.
Hi, Dick. Thank you again for your presentation. It was terrific, and all the different things you do. I didn't see swimming pools. What about outdoor swimming pools? Say you've got one, you've had it, you don't use it anymore, and you wonder if you could turn it into a cistern or turn it into a way that you could capture that water and use it somehow. That's the first question. The second question is, does the city still allow you to get these barrels? And if so, would we be able to get that through your website, the information on that? And thanks again for all you do.
Let me start with the city backwards. The city of Austin does not distribute the rain barrels, but they do rebate them on their rebate program. So you can buy them and get a rebate. They're no longer distributing them. As to the conversion of swimming pools, I saw an article recently about a company that's specializing in that. But that underground cage that I showed you is a great tool to use to convert a swimming pool. So you've already got an excavation done. You can line it and put those cages in it, cover it up, and then put a deck over the top of it. Many of the underground cisterns that are being built in the hill country where they do excavate use swimming pool contractors to blow in the cement in the cavity of the hole, and then they put cribbing in it and pour a concrete cap on top of it. I've seen one that has a putting green on top of that. So you can be very innovative, and yes, you've already got the swimming pool. It's going to be expensive to keep the swimming pool up. When I was at the city, I did rebate for a fellow that converted his to rainwater harvesting in Northwest Hills and built a deck over the top of it. So there's some things you need to think about when you do it, but it's a big hole in the ground, and I want to make use of it, yes.
Any more questions? Okay, right here.
Hi, my name is Nicole Smith, and I had a question about making rain barrels. I've seen some where they've converted a large plastic trash can, and I was interested in hooking one up to a drip irrigation system in my garden, but I'm concerned about pressure. So do I need a pump for that, or can I just elevate the can? Or is that even a good idea to make your own?
She has a very interesting list of about 10 questions. Let's attack the trash can route. They're made to hold trash and not 8 pounds per gallon water. So they would probably work for a while, but they will probably eventually split. They're just not made for that capacity. Rain barrels that you purchase are in the $100 range that look like a trash can, but they're made tougher. You can get 55-gallon drums if you know what's been in them before and convert those into a rain barrel. As far as putting them up a little bit to increase elevation, I would put them up a little bit on a rock just so you can get a watering can under the lowest under the lowest faucet, but you only increase the pressure 0.43 psi per foot of elevation. So if you had a 10-foot tall tank, 10 feet of water in it, it has less than 5 psi. Most drip irrigation systems are rated at 15 psi. So it will weep out of a drip system, out of a rain barrel, but it won't weep at the gallon per hour rate that's on the little emitters. So they make them now for rain barrels that would get you more water out of there. You can use soaker hoses. You can use the upside down ones that used to, as kids, we'd run through them, the ones that spray the water up into the air, the little tubes. You can turn them upside down and they'll weep out into your garden. But you won't find the rate, so you just have to kind of watch it yourself. It's going to drain pretty fast.
We have another question here.
Hi, Dick. I'm Maria Fowler, and I have a question regarding the types of tanks and the material. You mentioned various colors, or perhaps painting a tank or covering it to reduce algae. What about the metal tanks? Do you have to cover those, or do you have to do anything with them, or are they good to go?
The question is mostly about the metal tanks. The metal tanks are opaque, so the only reason why we're painting them is to keep the algae out, so it's not letting the sunlight in. The plastic tanks are now made with the type of materials that would be okay for drinking water. I think it's PBA free or whatever the terminology is. And so I wouldn't mind using the plastic tanks even for a drinking water system now. It's a choice. Now the metal tanks, in order for the city to rebate them, have to have a liner in them. So the ones that I showed you, the smaller metal ones, have a sprayed-on epoxy-type liner on the inside. The larger ones that are corrugated actually have a type of Excelsior material like thick landscape fabric that's hung as a sock on the inside of the tank, And then inside of that is a vinyl food-grade liner that's hung in the tank that actually holds the water. So the metal is to keep the water in shape. Much like the trash can question, the metal can really hold a lot of water, whereas the plastic ones are pretty thick to make them hold that amount of water.
We have a question here. Would you stand and say your name?
My name is Felicia Congable, and I wanted to thank you again for installing our rainwater system at Westwood High School, which was
A long time ago.
a long time ago, and recently they remodeled and took it all apart.
Recently what?
They remodeled, they
Oh.
expanded the school, they took it down, the pipes disappeared, etc. But I wanted to ask a question about, is the term inflow the water inside of a creek? When you harvest rainwater, the benefit is it's not going down this impervious cover. But at the same time, is it getting to those creeks slowly? And I understand, is it in Arizona or someplace where they don't allow people to do rainwater harvesting because the rain belongs to everyone? And am I misunderstanding that, or can you?
Okay. Felicia's asking several questions again. Let's start with the legal regulations. Primarily, the most news was about Colorado, and that the snowfall belongs to the state of Colorado. Therefore, that's the source of their drinking water. So for a long time, you could not harvest your snow or your water in Colorado. That has been changed. Now, that same law applies in Texas. Texas has a similar law. But there is an exemption already written into the law that exempts a certain number of acre feet per year that you would never reach in a typical household situation. So if you were to try to put in a large rainwater harvesting system in a community, you would probably have to go to the Texas Water Development Board and seek permission to gather more than that exempted amount of the acre feet. But nobody's watching it too much, so we're seeing some combined systems being installed. And the overflow, the city of Austin does not give a tremendous impervious cover credit for rainwater harvesting because their requirements for that first inch of rain, half inch of rain that must be collected in stormwater detention ponds has to be emptied in 24 hours. So that's not a water conservation benefit. You can't save it and hold it and use it in dry periods. That said, Samsung put in a large system and increased the depth and width of their real nice looking pond, and so they can harvest a lot of sheet flow off of the landscape and go into those ponds and use it for landscape irrigation. They just must bring it down by the amount that the city requires them to do in the 24 hours, and then the remainder of it, that extra depth that they put in, they can use it in the landscape judiciously later. So harvesting rainwater and reducing flow, it's going to happen short term. We can reduce the impact on the creeks, but once it overflows, it's going to go the same place it did when your tanks are full. So get a bigger tank.
Any more questions? Well, while I'm walking over there, I want to ask one of my own. What proportion of the populace in Austin is using rainwater harvesting at present?
It's probably a cross-section. How many of you are saving any rainwater in some method? So that's probably about the distribution that we see. Maybe 40% of the people are doing something. 20% of the people are doing a considerable amount. 10% of the people are doing an exceptional amount. So it's growing, though.
We have a question here. Stand up and say your name.
Hi, my name is Anna. I'm about to ask my builder to install gutters on my house. Do I need to recommend to him any kind of specific materials to use that are better for harvesting? And is there any rebate associated with gutter installation?
The question revolves around gutters, and gutters are always desirable on a house because it directs the water away from your foundation. Then you can add water equally around the foundation as you need to with soaker hoses or something. So whether you put in rainwater harvesting or not, go ahead and do gutters. The city does not rebate for the gutter part of it, so you're not missing anything out of the rebates there. If you're immediately thinking about doing rainwater harvesting, you would probably want to coordinate that with the gutter company and the rainwater company. It just so happens that the people that are working on 49th Street are both rainwater and gutter people, so they're coordinating that equally. And the reason I say that is because you don't need the metal downspouts. In most cases, you're going to replace it with PVC pipe. So we'll be paying twice if you're going to do it in stages.
Jim McCall, I was curious about the pond you have. What kind of a catchment area do you need in relation to the size of the pond to keep it filled with rainwater?
My pond is only 750 gallons, and my rainwater harvesting catchment around this urban house in Manor is about 1,000 gallons. So unless I'm going to drain it for some reason, like this spring, I'm going to completely clean it, I can keep up with it pretty well. And so it just depends on the size that you have. I don't encourage people to do a large fish pond unless you have a source of water other than municipal water. And even if you're on a well, you're paying the pumping electricity to fill it up. So I love the fish. I love the ponds. I'm still an Austin Pond Society member, but we got to be careful with that water.
I saw another hand over here. I thought, okay.
Thanks, Dick. Great presentation. I struggle trying to balance how much it costs to have a rainwater harvesting system, a cistern, big tank, with how much water it can collect. And if you're just using it for landscape irrigation, how much can you do with that? And then do you have to go back to city water and, 5,000 gallon tank you can use in watering your yard in probably one day?
Exactly right. So the question revolves around kind of a thorny subject of, does it pay to harvest the rainwater? Probably not. But we do a lot of things because it's the right thing to do. So I would approach it from that standpoint and say, let's try to harvest as much as we can, as economically as we can. I work with people to try to figure out different ways to recycle containers if they have them, or just harvest the water on the landscape, such as the rain gardens. So this is taking advantage of the sheet flow. Now you're also getting the water from your neighbors, so if they're using weed and feed, you're going to get weed and feed in your rain garden and probably kill all your plants. So there's problems with that. But I think if we try to do it step by step and do as much as we can, the City of Austin rebate is a tremendous asset. It's, as far as I'm concerned, unsustainable. When I did the rebate, I could only justify 15 cents a gallon. So they are really going above board in how much they're encouraging people to do rainwater harvesting. But the city sees it as a way to encourage people to talk about rainwater. Even the rain barrels get people thinking. If your rain barrel is half full and you're getting ready to water your grass, you might say, well, the lakes are half full. Maybe I don't need to water my grass for a couple of days. Let it go a little bit off color. Turn off those irrigation systems and learn how to use the button. And just go push the button on the day that you need it to water, And I think we can greatly conserve the water that we do have.
By the way, there are rebate applications on the table in the back of the sanctuary as you exit, if you want to look through that material. We have a question from Douglas Bauer.
Dick, I have a follow-on question to something that was asked earlier, which is most of the water supply in this area is from rainwater, of course. And it seems to me that rainwater harvesting is somewhat of a zero-sum game in that if you're collecting rainwater in a rain barrel as opposed to letting it be used to either recharge the aquifer or refill the reservoirs. The question is that actually advantageous? I was wondering if you could comment on that.
It's a balance. And could we ever encourage rainwater harvesting, let's just say in Austin, so much that we would have to find another source of water because everybody's got rainwater in their barrels and they're not using it. But, people harvest the rainwater to use it. It's not like the folks that are buying up water rights and hoarding it. We use it. We put it on the ground. What doesn't evapotranspirate eventually finds its way into the aquifers. We're all on rainwater, whether you're pumping it or you're taking it out of the lakes. It's a hydrological cycle. It rains. It goes into somewhere. We take it out. We use it. Our body uses it. So I think we're not going to interrupt the natural cycle so much, and especially if we're going to be getting these rains in torrents. The main thing that's going to happen is if we really had everybody doing rainwater harvesting is we'd slow down those torrents into the Colorado River and maybe help protect the estuaries or whatever for that big surge of water that's going to go all the way down to the coast. So, yeah, put a barrel at every house and let's try to do that.
Are there any more questions? Well, compared to other cities, Dick, how does Austin rank in terms of its adoption of rainwater harvesting, other major cities?
I would say Austin is pretty much on the forefront, and different cities do rainwater harvesting for different reasons. If you go up to the northeast, they encourage rainwater harvesting for the salmon runs to make the water purer for the fish. Their cities had their rain gutters originally connected to their sanitary sewer systems. So when it rained, it overflowed the you-know-what into the streets. Here we have a separate system, but they've encouraged disconnects. Disconnect those downspouts and put them in rain barrels so it'll protect the salmon. Over in Arizona, they've gone to cutting openings in the curbs. How much water runs down the street into the sewers that goes to the lakes. Well, they're cutting those curbs. The city of Austin has done it at Big Stacy Park. You can see how they're encouraging rain gardens by cutting the curb, allowing the water, instead of running down the street, to run into the rain gardens, fill those up, and then slow down the water and run out later. So when this was first being done, the fellow up in Arizona that was doing it illegally. But now many cities are adopting this curb cut idea. Get the water. Instead of having raised areas and parking lots for big box stores where you plant trees and irrigate them, they're now making those a depression so that the water runs off and goes into those depressions. It's filtered by the grasses before it percolates into the aquifers underneath, so the grass and the soil are actually cleaning the particulate matter and oils that are on the streets. So we're rethinking how we harvest water. We harvest it on the landscape or in cisterns.
Oh, one more question here from Dale Beulah.
Conservation question. How does Austin compare with other cities as far as its per-person consumption? I know we always talk about conservation, but we don't often hear how we compare with, say, other cities in Texas or other places.
I think Austin is not unique, but as our population has grown, our per capita use of water has gone down. So each person is using less, but more and more people are moving to Austin, to Texas. So we still have a net loss in conservation efforts because the population is growing. But people are doing their part every day on a better basis. So low flow shower heads, low flow aerators, low flow toilets, all of that kind of stuff. We've got the low hanging fruit. Now it's going to be harder to make that go down a lot more, and it's going to be dependent mostly on what you do yourself, how you conserve that water.
Well, I think that we want to ask our speaker to just take maybe 3 or 4 minutes and do a final recap for us. And thank you again for basically your leading edge work on this issue. What could you give us as a set of final recommendations?
Rainwater harvesting is part of a bigger picture of water conservation. So next week you'll hear from the Wildflower Center, and Andrea DeLong Amaya will be here talking about the plants. Well, those plants do very well on lower amounts of water. So you look at the big picture aspect of your landscape and reduce the water use by using the right plants. I don't encourage you to put in rocks as mulch, even though the City of Austin rebates it. From a green building standpoint, it's a heat sink. It works in Arizona, works in Tucson, where it gets real cold at night and the rocks absorb the cold and give it back during the day. Here, the rocks are going to absorb the heat and give it back to you about 5 o'clock when you get home. So try to use natural mulches around your native landscapes. Some plants like a lot of mulch, some don't like a lot of mulch. Right now, I'm cutting all the plants back, getting ready for spring. February 14th is when you cut back your bush roses, so we're getting close to that, Valentine's Day. And my landscape is beginning to look a little bit barren, but as cycles do, it will come back in the spring, and little bulbs are beginning to grow, and the vegetable sprouts are beginning to come up. Getting my little seeds started, and we're having a lot of fun in the landscape, so I encourage you to do the same thing.
Well, thank you so much for a great presentation, Dick.
Thank you.